In the quiet village of Umuoka, where the moon shone brighter than lanterns and the wind carried whispers from the forest, a child named Abili was born. She was beautiful, too beautiful, skin like morning light, eyes that seemed older than the earth, a smile that made grown women uneasy. The day she was born, the oldest woman in the village grew silent. "She has come before," the old woman whispered. "This child is Ogbanje." In the traditions of the land, an Ogbanje was a spirit child, one who comes, dies, and returns again to the same mother. Abili was her mother's third child. The first two had died before their fifth birthday. Now Abili had arrived. As she grew, strange things followed her. At night, she would sit outside alone, speaking softly into the darkness. When asked who she was talking to, she would smile. "My friends are calling me." At times, she would fall sick suddenly, burning with fever. Then by morning, she would be perfectly fine. The villagers grew afraid, but her mother refused to accept it. "This one will live," she said firmly. "This one is different." One evening, when Abili was 7, she walked toward the forest during the Harmattan dusk. Her little feet moved as if guided by something unseen. At the edge of the forest, she stopped. The wind rose, the trees bent, and a whisper surrounded her. "Come back," it called. "Come back to us." Abili closed her eyes. For a moment, she remembered. A place between worlds, a promise she had made long ago, a cycle she had repeated many times. She was not just a child. She was a spirit who had chosen to return. But this time, something was different. She heard another voice, her mother's voice, soft, breaking, praying. "Please, let her stay." And for the first time in all her lifetimes, Abili felt something stronger than the call of the spirits. Love. She opened her eyes. "I am not coming," she whispered into the forest. The wind roared in anger. The whispers turned to cries. But Abili stepped back. One step toward the village, one step toward life. The next morning, the old woman came with sacred chalk and herbs. They searched for Abili's Iyi Uwa, the hidden object that tied her spirit to the spirit world. Near the roots of a great Iroko tree, they found it, a small buried stone wrapped in red thread. The connection was broken. From that day forward, Abili never fell mysteriously ill again. She never walked toward the forest at dusk. She lived, and she grew old, very old. They said she carried wisdom beyond her years. They said her eyes had seen more than one lifetime. But only Abili knew the truth. She had broken a cycle, and sometimes the strongest spirits are not the ones who return, but the ones who choose to stay. Years passed. Abili did not die. That alone made the village whisper. Ogbanje children were not meant to grow old. But Abili grew taller, stronger, quieter. Yet something inside her had not completely left. Sometimes at night she would wake suddenly, as if someone had called her name from very far away. And in her dreams, she walked again between two worlds. One rainy season, the river began to rise beyond its banks. The elders said the spirits were restless. That night, Abili stood outside her hut and looked toward the forest. She felt it again, the pull, stronger than before. "You broke the promise," the wind seemed to say. "You belong to us." Her chest tightened. For years she had ignored it. For years she had chosen to stay human. But the spirit world does not forget easily. The next morning, the village woke to shocking news. 3 children had fallen mysteriously ill. High fever, strange murmuring in their sleep. The old woman sent for Abili. "You broke your Iyuwa," the old woman said carefully. "But sometimes, the spirit must still be appeased." Abili's heart pounded. "Are they calling me back?" she whispered. The old woman shook her head slowly. "No, they are angry because you refused them." The village began to look at her differently again. Not as a child, not as a survivor, but as a bridge between worlds. That night, Abili made a decision. If the spirits wanted her, she would face them, alone. She walked back to the Iroko tree where her Iiua had once been buried. The wind rose immediately. The forest trembled. Shadows moved where there were none. "You cannot leave us," the whispers surrounded her. "You are ours." Abili stood firm. "I was yours," she said calmly. "But I chose love." The shadows grew darker. "You made a covenant." "And I break it," she replied. "I choose life. I choose my mother. I choose this earth." The ground shook violently. For a moment, it felt as if the world itself would split open. Then silence, heavy, deep, final. The wind stopped. The forest stilled. The connection was severed completely. Back in the village, the 3 sick children recovered by morning. Abili returned home at sunrise. But something had changed. Her eyes were no longer restless. The pull was gone. The spirit world had released her. Not because she was weak, but because she was strong enough to refuse it. From that day on, no one called her Ogbanje again. They called her something else, chosen. Because sometimes, the greatest power is not in belonging to the spirits, but in choosing to be human. Abili grew into a woman unlike any other in Umuoka. She married. She laughed. She lived fully. But the elders still watched her carefully, because some things never leave completely. Years later, Abili gave birth to a daughter. The night the child was born, the wind howled like it had many years ago. The old woman, now very frail, came to see the baby. She looked into the child's eyes, and her hands began to tremble. The baby did not cry. She only stared, calm, knowing, old. The old woman whispered, "The door you closed has opened again." Abili felt cold. "No," she said firmly. "The cycle ended with me." But that night, as she held her daughter close, she felt something familiar. A presence. Not dark, not angry. Watching. When the child turned 5, strange things began. She would speak of places she had never been. She would draw symbols in the sand that looked ancient. And once, she said something that made Abili's heart stop. "Mama," the girl asked softly, "why did you leave us?" Abili froze. "Leave who?" "The ones in the forest." That evening, Abili walked alone to the old Iroko tree again. The air was still, but this time, there was no anger, only silence and understanding. The spirits had not come for revenge. They had come for balance. She had broken the cycle for herself, but the doorway between worlds had marked her bloodline. Her daughter was not Ogbanje. She was something else. A bridge. One who could walk between worlds, without being trapped by either. The old woman called it a gift, not a curse. "Some families are chosen," she said, "not to suffer the spirits, but to understand them." Abili returned home with peace in her heart. She knelt before her daughter. "You are not bound to them," she whispered. "You are stronger than that." And this time, there was no wind, no whisper, no pulling force, only choice, because the true power was never in returning. It was in deciding where you belong. And Abili had taught her bloodline something the spirits could not control. Freedom. When your past calls, do not answer. It has nothing new to say. The past often tries to pull us back through memories, regrets, and old habits. It reminds us of mistakes, missed opportunities, and people who once played a role in our lives. But revisiting it repeatedly rarely changes anything. The story has already been written. Growth happens when you focus on the present and the future, not when you stay trapped in what has already happened. Lessons from the past are valuable, but living there prevents you from moving forward. Sometimes the healthiest decision is to close the door on what no longer serves you, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect and awareness that your life is still unfolding. The past can teach you, but it should never control you. Your future deserves your attention more than your history does.